This is America's Forum on Newsmax TV. I'm J.D. Hayworth, joined by Miranda Kahn and also psychologist Dr. Terry Lyles. Terry, it's great to have you back with us. We're going to take a look now at an article from the web edition of the New York Post. I referenced it before the break because it's very curious. Here's the headline: Feds looking for babysitters to help with illegal immigrant kids. Terry, before we get to the psychological impact of family abandonment, I want to talk to you about the Border Patrol agents and the ICE personnel that have been pressed into a situation where they're preparing formula and changing diapers and doing things that a young parent might do at home, but now at these detention centers. What level of stress does that build up in folks from the Border Patrol?
Yeah, I can imagine, because, they're not, obviously they're trying to reach bad guys. They're trying to keep the border secure, and to be babysitters basically is a very different thing for them. But I imagine very frustrating as well. I mean, reportedly 300 to 400 kids coming over every day. I mean, that's a lot of people thrown in areas like shelters, that somebody has to take care of them and then process them, whatever that is. So I'm sure the whole environment is not what it's supposed to be. It's makeshift at best.
And you take a look at this, and what amazes me is you often hear talk on this side of the border when there's any talk about enforcing the law, the reflexive thing is, oh, you're tearing families apart. You have the opposite to be true now, where apparently parents are willing to abandon their children. And that brings us to what kids must feel somehow leaving their Central American countries and by whatever means traveling the length of Mexico and ending up on our back doorstep on the southern border. What does this do to a young child?
Well, I think the interesting part is, the abandonment issue that took off, very early on in their lives. I'm sure if a parent left or a family member, and then you've got all the other things that go along with it, which could be the abuse, the journey itself,
right,
trafficking. We don't really know all that's happening to these poor kids, but they probably have one thing on their mind: is find someone that speaks Spanish in that country, meaning ours, that I'm related to.
Right, because they don't always have family there either.
Correct.
A lot of these kids, and some of these girls, these young girls, are being raped, being put into, sex trafficking. You just don't know what's going to happen, and that just tells you how bad the situation is in Central America right now. That these parents, I can't even fathom taking my child and just trusting some complete stranger that he or she is just going to make it in a country where I may or may not have relatives.
Right, and I think that speaks to the condition that is so bad that you're in a survival mode. There's basically three functions that we've run in. We survive, we function, and then we thrive. And most of us are trying to thrive each day and do the very best we can, be the best we are. These folks are just trying to survive every day. They're trying to eat and sleep and, like you say, not get raped or beat up or killed. So, they have a lot going on in their lives psychologically, but also physically, just trying to, stay safe.
What are some of the similarities? I know, Dr. Lyles, you've gone to Haiti, you were there for people following 9/11, Katrina. You've been all over the world covering crises like this one.
Sure.
What's going on in the minds of some of these young kids?
That's the most devastating thing, and I thought about that coming into the studio today because I still hear stories and see faces of children. Thailand was, we had 7,000 or so kids that were orphaned when that tsunami hit, and they're in refugee camps. I don't speak Thai. I have translators with me. We're trying to help these kids, and they're in shock, really. They're demoralized, and they don't know what to do. So giving them hope every day was a big part of what those shelters had to do. So the tough part about these Border Patrol agents, they're not trained to do this. They're trained to attack bad guys. So these kids have all these needs, and it's really I think it's a political conversation. I think it's a business deal that's going on too, that these traffickers are getting money for running these children across. So there's a lot here, but the kids are what is so alarming to me, and I'm sure to all of us.
And even as we focus on small children, the preceding panel talked about the fact that while this is being portrayed in the popular press as little kids or moms with babes in arms, the fact is we're bringing in a whole lot of these people associated with gangs and minors that may be technically minors, 17 years of age, but who have criminal reputations of their own, but all that seems to be lost. perhaps unfair, but you raise the political spectrum here. In terms of a psychological operation to achieve a political goal, it's not, is it far afield to think that this was choreographed and prearranged, or at the very least exploited?
Yeah, that's a loaded question, but I'll tell you, we know that there's politics in everything, and as I say, there's always three sides to a story. You've got each side, and then you've got the truth somewhere in the middle. Right. So regardless of what the political aspiration is and what's going on, we have to do a better job at securing our borders, and we have to do a better job on allowing people to come here, because you don't want to stop that. I mean, as I commonly say, there's not many people in America that's from America unless you're Native American.
So make
we
the
all
process
came from somewhere
a little
else.
Easier, right?
Absolutely, and make it logical that people can understand.
Well, what often gets lost in this is existing law put into place mechanisms to help have accountability. For example, families or individuals called upon to sponsor immigrants into the country to be accountable legally, financially, while someone is getting on their feet. Now, it appears that as we've seen these kids abandoned, so too have we abandoned the policies we have right there. So what has happened to where now, Doctor, we don't have a situation where it seems that Americans are willing to step up and sponsor these folks, because that's existing law. That's something that somehow has gotten lost in the mix.
Right. And again, I go back to the children. You raised the question earlier of just how difficult it is for these young people, not even just children, even teenagers, that some of them could even be hardened warriors already. By the time you're 17 years old in a tough place, you've already learned how to fight and survive. But it's the mindset that what comes into our country and what it does to our entire culture. So it's a huge topic, obviously, in every election year, of course. But I think now, because this has been behind some scenes of other big stories that's out there, we're just now really starting to peel this back and look at the trafficking side of it, as we talked about. Right. I just shudder at these young girls and what they must go through just to get to the border.
Right. Well, I mean, in last year, what was it, October, they said we skyrocketed as far as the number of illegal immigrants coming to this country. They're expecting 60,000 this year alone.
Sure.
So they're here now. And you mentioned babysitting. What's the best case scenario? What should we do now for these young people? What's the best case scenario for them and for the people in this country?
Well, I think I can only look at the real human element of this. So I would say best thing to do is to do what we do in shelters, which is you need medical, psychological, and prescriptive teams in their area, along with people who can watch after them and feed them and take care of them. So like the Red Cross.
But why is that important? Because there are going to be some people that say, not my problem.
Sure. Well, but our whole country would have to say that, because that's what makes our country great. So I think organizations have to step up and really, now that they see that this is a problem, that's why I like talking about this, because it brings awareness. I go to these sites, these refugee sites and these natural disasters. I send myself, my own company sends me and other people to go. I volunteer, in other words. So you've got to have people that say, somebody needs to do something, Somebody needs to step up.
And have you seen the difference? I mean, I know, like we were talking before we went on air, you were talking about Haiti, and you saw 75 people living in one house. So you've seen the difference, obviously, that counseling can make in these children's lives. What happens if we don't do anything?
Well, I think it's mass chaos. I think you've got something that was going on hundreds of years ago that we don't even want to think about. We would like to believe that we're still in a very highly developed society in the world, so to speak, but especially in America. And if children are coming here because they're trying to live and to find life, I think it's our responsibility to try to help them do that. I don't know about all the political ramifications of how long they stay here, what's the whole amnesty piece and how to secure the border. That's really above my pay grade. But the human element of this, if someone crosses our border, I think it's our responsibility to try to take care of them, at least in that short term, until we can figure out what to do with them.
And in terms of the triage, emotionally, in terms of physically, I want to turn to something else, though, psychologically. If once their condition is secured, especially for these kids who've just come across the border, isn't it better to reunite them with their mom and dad if they've been abandoned?
Yes, it is. But here's the dilemma. When they get to this country, they're probably handed a piece of paper, some kind of piece of acknowledgement that says, okay, you need to report back here in 30 or 60 days, whatever the actual law says. But they're not coming back because in some cases they go, my parents may not even be alive if I went back. Maybe they're already gone. You know, maybe they were staying with an aunt or a cousin or just a neighbor. We don't really know. So listen, they would almost rather come here, have freedom, and probably stay with strangers than they would to go back and risk their own lives.
Dr. Terry Lyles, as always, we appreciate your input on the psychological impact of what is happening in today's news. Miranda, good to have you here on the interview as well. And now your comments to us. We'd love to get them. You can send them to us via Twitter. Tweet us at NewsmaxTV, hashtag America's Forum. There's also email, our address, connect@newsmaxtv.com, and it's facebook.com/Newsmax.